If I, if I could, I'd like to open the program today and talk a little bit about the father of an Islamic terrorist who went to a Hillary Clinton rally and media reaction to that compared to what they can talk about with Donald Trump. And I bring that up because the media has it out for Donald Trump, and so anything he says is going to be portrayed as being somehow sinister and bad for the country. Because the media folks now feel that they no longer are just going to report the facts, but they are going to tell you how to vote, and because they believe that what they think everyone else should think. That's what we're now dealing with in this country. And there's been a lot said about this over the last couple of weeks. Trump made a comment yesterday. You've all heard it by now, I'm sure. He made a comment saying, "Look, if Hillary Clinton gets elected, it's going to be a mess when it comes to Supreme Court judges or justices, and she'll also be nominating federal judges all over the country and lower courts as well." And then he made a comment. He said, "Unless, of course, the Second Amendment people stop it." It's an ambiguous comment, folks, not a recommendation of anything. And what he may have been talking about is the NRA has done a pretty good job of lobbying members of the U.S. Senate when it comes to judges who they would like to see, well, not get the job. Okay, how's that? So the NRA and Gun Owners of America and some of these other organizations, they go down to Washington. They go in and they lobby these folks. They do the lobbying effort and they say, no, this guy's not going to make it. This guy's going to be an impediment to the Second Amendment and the rights people have according to the U.S. Constitution. So that well could be what Trump meant. And in fact, on TV last night, he made the same comment. But media pounced on it, and media is generally doing a wall to wall on it when it comes to coverage because they can avoid talking about some of the embarrassing things that are going on with the Clinton campaign right now. Number one, Drudge has a story out today that says Mr. Clinton, a former president of the United States, was using her position in a pay for play effort. In other words, he was making sometimes $500,000 a pop giving speeches, and she was facilitating this while she was serving as Secretary of State, which is highly unethical and perhaps illegal. On the very same Drudge report, there was a story Julian Assange, the man behind WikiLeaks. Liberals loved him when WikiLeaks was spilling the secrets involved with the Iraqi war. They thought he was the greatest thing. Now, of course, they see him as a threat. He's obviously a guy who's, they claim now, working for the Russian Empire. And I always thought liberals liked Russia. I mean, back when I was a kid growing up, they were fond of the Soviet Union, which, of course, Russia comprised the largest part of. But they've been making all of these claims that, that Russia got a hold of the DNC emails and perhaps Hillary Clinton's private emails, and that they were giving them to this WikiLeaks in order to embarrass Hillary Clinton. Assange was on a Dutch TV show, and he made a comment that suggests that the leaks actually in the DNC emails came from a young man who worked at the Democrat National Committee. He was 27 years old when 2 weeks ago he was on his way actually to visit at the FBI. He wanted to talk to somebody at the FBI. He was gunned down and killed in Washington, D.C. And immediately the report was, well, it looks like he was out at 4:30 in the morning and it must be robbery. Except whoever shot and killed him left him with his wallet, his cell phone, and his watch. So there was no robbery that took place. And you wonder, did he have any documents on him that suddenly vanished as well? Now, I'm not what you'd call one of these Alex Jones style conspiracy theorists, but when I hear a story like this, and Assange said, "Look, I'm not going to confirm that he was a source for us. We don't, tell people who our sources are. It doesn't work that way." But if indeed this young man had been the source and then he ends up dead, I'm a little concerned about that. And media should be concerned about that, mainstream media, but it isn't. You may recall a few years ago there was a reporter in Los Angeles, and he apparently was doing some digging into the Obama White House. The guy went out for a drive down a residential street. Speed limit was 30 miles per hour, I believe. He wasn't speeding, but his car suddenly veered off the road, slammed into a pole or a tree, and then burst into flames, and he was cooked to death. Now, my experience is I've been involved in a few fender benders in my life. But if you're generally driving at 25 or 30 miles per hour, the threat of your automobile bursting into flames and cooking you is relatively low. Now, if you were driving, I don't know, flat out at 95, that might be an issue. But at the time, we were told this guy was about ready to blow up a big story, a big investigation that he'd been doing, and it was going to have a huge impact. And then he ended up dead. So I'm beginning to look at the Democrats and think, are we dealing with people here who will do anything, I mean anything, to maintain a grip on power and to change America in the image that they would like, as well as their fellow travelers in media would like? Omar Mateen's daddy showed up at a rally for Hillary Clinton a couple of days ago in Kissimmee, Florida. Omar Mateen is the man, the Islamic terrorist, who went into a nightclub and killed 49 people just a couple of months ago. Now, think about this. A number of people, Rush Limbaugh, Eric Erickson, have raised the question, what if Dylan Roof's dad showed up at a Trump rally? Dylan Roof is the young man who went into a church in South Carolina and shot 9 people dead. What if his daddy showed up at a Trump rally? What would the media say? Well, all you got to do is remember David Duke. David Duke, a former Klansman, left the Klan, though, about 30 years ago. But David Duke has a radio show in Louisiana, and David Duke endorsed Donald Trump a few months back. And media immediately said, you've got to denounce David Duke. He's a racist. Now, Duke apparently isn't as racist as he was when he was young, although he's still one of those people who says we have to fight for white America. You make up your own call on where Duke stands. I'll leave that for you. But Trump said, I barely know this guy. He'd heard about him some years ago when they were both running as Reform Party candidates, or trying to, about 20 years ago. And Trump said, don't know anything really about him, a whole lot about him. And media said, oh, you must know all about him. You need to denounce him. And Trump said, well, I didn't ask him for an endorsement. Yeah, but that doesn't matter. You need to denounce him. Omar Mateen's daddy did not kill 49 people. I acknowledge that. His son did. And, the sons are not guilty of the sins of the father, and I guess that's vice versa, except the father had a huge influence on his son. The father used to do a TV show over in the Middle East, and the father used to talk about how we should basically be hanging every homosexual in the country. This guy shows up at a Clinton rally and tells reporters afterwards he's endorsing Hillary Clinton. All right, then why doesn't she have to do the same thing Donald Trump did when it came to David Duke? Or if Dylan Roof's daddy showed up at a Trump rally, what would the media be saying? That question, I think, is very fair. These are a couple of talking heads over at MSDNC, which is the main mouthpiece for the Democrat Party in this country. And they're talking about this situation in Florida and trying to paper it over for Hillary Clinton.
He was interviewed by some local TV stations, one asking him, well, what were you thinking when Secretary Clinton started talking about the Orlando shooting? And he said, look, we have been cooperating with investigators. And then he made the point that he has every right to be there, just like anyone else who lives here. But it's certainly getting a lot of attention here today, Thomas.
Yeah, absolutely. And being right over her shoulder there, behind her on her left-hand side, visible, and also, again, being chased down by reporters to give comment about why he would attend. Very interesting, and certainly a reflection of the Clinton camp to respond so quickly.
Oh, very interesting. And, a wonderful reflection of the Clinton camp in their quick response. There was no quick response. They were silent on it when it was first reported for hours on end. And hours in today's media universe with instant communication and that we have, I'm telling you, folks, media is out to get Donald Trump, and you may not like Trump. Howard Kurtz, speaking at Fox News. As I say, he used to work inside the mainstream media, one of the best-known media critics in the country. He was addressing this on Fox just in the last couple of days. This is not the entirety of what he had to say. It's a little long, but I think you need to hear it. This is about 2 minutes of a 4.5-minute commentary that he offered.
The media's Trump bashers are finally coming out of the closet. They are finally acknowledging, admitting, conceding what is obvious to anyone with a kindergarten education, that the entire press establishment is heavily tilted against Donald Trump. It's not that they favor Hillary Clinton. She's been almost overshadowed and in many cases ignored with all the negative Trump coverage. Now, this is not a defense of Donald Trump. Donald Trump has made mistakes in this campaign, a number of them lately. Those deserve to be covered aggressively. But now we're at a point where if you look at since the convention, the last 10 days, 2 weeks of coverage, it is so overwhelmingly and personally negative against Donald Trump that you have to ask what is going on. Now, here's an attempt by Jim Rutenberg. He's the media columnist for the New York Times, to acknowledge this. I give him credit for that, but also to defend it and justify it in a way that I think cannot be justified. So Rutenberg writes that if you, as a reporter, view a Trump presidency as something that's potentially dangerous, then your reporting is going to reflect that. You'd move closer than you've ever been to being oppositional. That's uncomfortable and uncharted territory for every mainstream non-opinion journalist I've ever known, and by normal standards, untenable. But, says Rutenberg, normal standards may not apply. And this is the nub of the argument. And if some journalists have been saying this privately, now we have at least one saying it publicly, and it really is getting kind of obvious. There is a widespread feeling among many mainstream journalists. I'm not talking here about commentators who are paid for their opinions. Reporters, editors, producers, the people who kind of make the media machine hum, that Donald Trump is a threat to the country, that his presidency would be a disaster, that he's dangerous to Western civilization. And therefore, they have to do things. They have to go after him in a way that they have never gone after any presidential candidate, not even Republican presidential candidates. And somehow, this is sort of their duty to the country.
Now, there's a couple more minutes of that that's available at the Fox website if you were to check that out. But let me just, Howard Kurtz again, the media critic you were just listening to. Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310, KLIX and newsradio1310.com. It's 8:18 and we have 55 on our way into the upper 70s before the day is over. Let me just offer a couple of more thoughts before the break on this, and then after the break, perhaps we can take some of your comments as well. You have people, well, I'll put it this way. When Trump first was running, he was not my choice. And right up until Ted Cruz dropped out, Donald Trump was not my choice. But after that, and now I look at Hillary Clinton, and now you have people like Julian Assange suggesting that the Democrats are going around whacking people who might be spilling the beans about what they're really up to in the background. If this is truly a criminal syndicate, then the media is covering up for it. And Donald Trump is apparently a threat to that syndicate. You also have people such as the editorial board at the Wall Street Journal. The Wall Street Journal is the mouthpiece for American robber barons. That is, the big traders on Wall Street and the like. They're vehemently opposed to Trump, even though they portray themselves as conservatives. Why are they opposed to Trump? He might bring the reign of the robber barons to an end, and that frightens that special interest. You have other Republicans, the guys who make their money sitting around the Beltway in Washington pontificating but never actually doing anything when it comes to action. You know, the guys at National Review and the guys over at the Washington Examiner. Hey, a lot of them are good people, but you know what? They're opposed to Trump too because he threatens their meal ticket too. We are frankly in the midst of a potential revolution here, and it is being squashed by a cabal, criminal Clinton cabal, allied with media and now many conservatives and robber barons too. What are you going to do about it? We've got more coming up in just a minute, 20 minutes after 8 o'clock. Bill Colley with you on KLIX. And you can also hear us at our website, newsradio1310.com. Go there and click on the Listen Live button, hear the entire show. I hope to hear from you on this topic in just a few minutes. Just a quick note, Breitbart has picked up the latest, they've been all over this case from a couple of months ago here in Twin Falls. They picked up the latest case involving a potential or alleged pervert from an Islamic background here in Twin Falls, attacking what you might call a mentally disabled person on Friday. We'll get to that a little later in the show. We've got a couple of other things, though, coming up first. In about 10 minutes, going to be joined by Dr. Jonathan Tripp, and we're talking about back-to-school issues. And back-to-school issues mean sore throats and other illnesses that people have to be aware of, but some of them can be more serious than others. We do it every Wednesday with Dr. Tripp or one of his associates. We sit down, we talk about a particular medical issue, and we give you an opportunity to chime in and offer some thoughts on that. Right now it's 56. Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310, KLIX, and newsradio1310.com. Tripp Family Medicine is located on Fillmore Street, directly across from the main post office right here in Twin Falls. And remember, life's too short not to feel good. 736-0300, the number to reach us, 736-0300. I'm looking at our temperature this morning. We're supposed to get up into the upper 70s, but we've got a ways to go. Right now it's 56. You're up next, and you're on the air.
Good morning, Bill. You know, I think this whole thing, the more and more the rhinos start picking on Trump and everything else, the more and more it makes me want to vote for him personally, because they're scared of him. The media is scared of him. They are picking on him on things that he say that are half as bad as things that they have done in the last year when cities were being burned by Black Lives Matter, and they says, oh, they have that right. Just
Yes.
leave them alone. That's okay. That was fine. That wasn't inciting any riot. When they're in the streets yelling, kill people, white people, cops, everything else, no problem. And when the people are starting to get shot, they're sitting there saying, well, you have to understand. No, you don't. You guys incited the riots. It happened. But this guy says something about the Second Amendment people stepping up to the game and doing their part to make sure that our Second Amendment doesn't get squashed. And they're twisting it into a pretzel like he's already put X's on Hillary's forehead.
Yeah, I don't think it might actually make it look prettier, but I don't think that was in any way his intent. I thank you for the call. If you're looking for some of these double standards, think about how the media treated the Tea Party movement and its marches, and how the media then turned around and treated Black Lives Matter and the Occupy demonstrators. Occupy demonstrators were crapping on police cars, raping and killing people in their encampments. And yet, you get a handful of ranchers who took over a wildlife refuge when no one else was there, and the media started saying, insurrection! This must be put down. Yeah. Bunch of guys sitting around eating Campbell's soup every night and playing a few cards. They were very dangerous. You're up next. You're on the air with Bill Colley on Top Story.
Good morning, Bill. Well, the Clinton crime syndicate, the number of bodies or people have died, like Vince Foster and so forth. Some people commit suicide, the gun's found in a different room, and things of that nature. Mena, Arkansas, the drug running and so forth. It's been documented down there. It's been a history of criminal activity, whether it's the emails. It's gotten to the globalists want Hillary, and they're so bad because they can't stand somebody like Trump. It reminds me of a movie with Glenn Ford called The Brotherhood of the Bell. He was trying to expose if you want to call it a conspiracy. And I mean, all hell broke loose. And that's exactly what I think has happened with Trump. He is so much of a danger to exposing and stopping their criminal activity to create a global plantation while we're going to be slaves in the elitists under a new world order, world government. And that's what they've been striving for. And that's why our economy's been going down, to create a third world government.
Sure.
So anyway, Bill, we need to support Trump, because if everybody out there says, well, he's not perfect, I can tell you, if you're listening to the national media, they're totally in the tank for Hillary.
Oh.
And we need to oppose that and point out the good things about Trump.
Hey, thank you much for the call. I got about 1 minute before the break. About 1 minute. Go ahead. You're on the air.
Yeah, good morning, Bill. I'll make this real short. I'm just thinking back years ago, news people used to be pretty honest. David Brinkley, Huntley, Walter Cronkite. But for some reason, over the last several years, they've taken sides with the Democrats. I'm trying to figure out what did they get out of it? Are they getting a kickback from the government? What happens if Trump gets elected? They all could be out of work? I'll take my comment off the air.
Hey, thank you. Well, and I folks may know this. I worked for David Schumacher for 7 years. David was the president of a company that I worked for in radio, and I remember a number of times having lunch with him, and he was telling me, he had been Cronkite's backup at CBS in the 1960s. David would anchor like Saturday nights and fill in when Walter was away, and also cover the space program and the like. And David said in 1986, he just simply walked away from anchoring the news. He was working in local TV in Washington. He'd gotten sick of working at the networks. And in 1986, he threw up his arms and said, enough of this, because he felt it had become so overwhelmingly liberal, and he just said they weren't doing the job that they were supposed to be doing any longer. Now, he had a great background. He'd flown with Strategic Air Command before he got into media, worked in newspapering and then radio and then television and at the network levels. But he used to also say that the newspapers were dying not just because of the internet, but because nobody trusted them anymore because of the overwhelming liberal bias. So they're cutting their own throats. Hey, Dr. Jonathan Tripp on the way in just a few minutes on KLIX.